Welcome to The Bridge. Fun conversations on culture, life, and everything in between.
Hello and welcome to The Bridge. We are a show that connects East and West. My name is Jason. I'm originally from California, and now I am living in beautiful Wuhan, China. Today with me is Alex.
Hello, everybody. This is Alex Shu. I am proudly representing the northeast part of China, Jilin specifically, but I am speaking to all of you from Beijing today.
Find us where you get your podcasts. If you like the show, then consider pushing the like button or giving us 5 stars. Suggestions, comments, anything you would like to share, email us at welovethebridge@gmail.com. We love the bridge. There is so much going on in America. Seems like more than ever in my lifetime. And I'm, 40-something years old. There's just so many topics one on top of the other, all smushed together and being dealt with poorly by everybody.
Sometimes I wonder whether it has always been like this, but now we're just, we have more access to information. And it's certainly, with everything that has unfolded in the States, is very overwhelming, to say the least.
One thing that I'd like to talk about today, and we'll try not to get it mixed up with everything else that's going on as much as possible, is the student loan crisis. So there are 1.7 to 1.9 trillion US dollars. Actually, before I finish my statement, I was writing a blog recently and I actually wrote 1.7 billion. And I was like, yeah, that sounds right. And I kept going. And someone was like, no, it's trillion.
Trillion,
like,
yeah.
Oh, oops. Yeah, so I had to go back and correct my article. 1.7 to 1.9 trillion US dollars in student loans, largely controlled by the federal government, with interest rates as high as 7% that have been on hold since the COVID, the whole thing. Yeah, the whole pandemic. And they just keep first it was Trump who paused student loan payments and then extended that 1 or 2 times. And then Biden kept extending it several times. And now the payments system hasn't been turned on yet. Although I hear there are a small percentage of people who have private loans and they're not connected to the federal system. And those people have been making payments the entire time. So, wow, that must be hard. But I guess they're scheduled to be reopened up again, or the payment schedule is supposed to start being paid again sometime in the end of August, I think. And so a lot of people are pressing Biden, who campaigned on canceling $10,000 of student loans, to cancel more. Looking at the statistics, that actually more than half of all major groups of people, except one, are for this, except Republicans who are over 50 years old. Almost every other measurable group of Americans thinks that some amount student loans should be canceled.
Yeah.
Some of the people who were advocating, Elizabeth Warren is advocating for $50,000 or something like that. And AOC, the same thing, to be expunged from, I guess, I don't know exactly how that works. I guess he just signs some sort of executive order and erases it. What is interesting is I just read on Business Insider, and this came out this month, Biden confirms that he's nearing a decision on student loan forgiveness and says a payment pause extension is on the table. So that sounds like his whole title confused me because it says both that he's nearing a decision on student loan forgiveness and that a pause extension. So which is it, or both? I think that the White House hasn't decided. And that's why the article sounds so confusing. But this decision on whether or not to cancel in part or in whole or in, however it's going to work, student loans has still not been decided. What's really interesting about this is there are 45 million Americans who own some amount of student loans, with a rough average of $30,000 owed per borrower. So obviously you have the high end of the spectrum, people with medical debt for their MD or whatever, who probably owe hundreds of thousands. And then you have the other side, people with maybe just a bachelor's degree, or they didn't even finish university and they owe like $10,000 or $20,000. So between there's a story about 1 out of 6 Americans in the United States is in huge debt. for debt that seems to be growing. I've read a lot about this recently, and a lot of people have paid as much as the principal already, sometimes twice the principal. But because of the way interest accumulates on these loans and the way that they don't have to make full payments even for what the interest is accumulating, people now owe more than they borrowed, having paid off the total amount that they borrowed in a lot of cases. So that is frightening.
I'm reading this and I just can't help but think. I think the article is trying to bring a little bit of light to the student loan debt, student loan crisis. All I can say is fine. $10,000 is better than nothing at all. But really, like, if you look at the statistics, yeah, sure, it says $30,000, on average for all borrowers. But people that I know, people who went to study arts and, any of those kind of general arts subjects, because those schools are for some reason more expensive, or they're either private or whatever. And I don't know if this statistics are only for people who attended public schools, like public universities. Like, did they account for people who are going to private universities?
No, yeah, absolutely. It accounts for both. There are different kinds of loans, though. Kind of university you went to, as long as it's accredited, you can take out federal student loans for. So you could go to Princeton and take it, or you could go to like California State University of Stanislaus, and you could take out the kind of loan in terms of who they borrowed from. Like, did they borrow from the federal government, or did they borrow from a private bank? That's a different issue than the public versus private school. As long as the school's accredited, then you should be able to take out federal student loans on that. And the loans generally are more easier for people with higher grades, GPAs, to get than for people with lower GPAs.
Oh, yeah.
2,500 years ago, an old man rode on his buffalo and headed west of China. Before he vanished into the wild, he left behind a book of 5,000 words, which for the next 2.5 millennia would have shaped the Chinese way of thinking. Subscribe to the Sayings of Lao Tzu and find out why generals with wisdom yield after winning the ultimate battle, and how staying behind just might help you get ahead of others. The Sayings of Lao Tzu is available on all major podcast platforms.
You're listening to The Bridge.
I spent a lot of time in the school system in the US, actually. I did 2 master's degrees there.
Wow,
so
smart.
Oh, I know. Thank you. No, it's not. There are all kinds of reasons that contributed to that outcome. But because I was in grad school, and a lot of people are actually really struggling with paying their tuition and being able to live, literally just to survive. And New York and Boston are both more expensive cities. And I hear my friends talking about taking out loans from different financial institutions and not just the federal loan, because the federal loan either arrives a little late or something. I don't know the exact requirement and the timeline for getting a federal loans, but a lot of students are not, at least in my school, I went to the new school in New York. A lot of kids, even undergrad kids, are not taking out federal loans. They're taking out private loans. And those are, I guess they could take out a little bit more to cover for their accommodation and their daily expenses. I think I talked about this before, but I know this girl who went to Berklee College of Music. When she graduated, she left school with a $360,000 loan. And up until, I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I last saw her or heard about her. For a bachelor's degree. Wow. So maybe I'm hearing all of these crazy stories. So when I see like, okay, $10,000, I'm like, yeah, right, that's going to help. Like, she's a music major. Like, for music major students, like, if you don't make it like John Mayer, like, who's going to pay that $300,000 loan for you? Now she's working as a public school music teacher that gets like, I don't know how much she makes, like $2,000 per month.
Oh, wow.
How are you going to make it back?
I don't know about non-federal loans, because I think the arrangement with those banks is based on individual cases. So, but like with the federal loan, if it's controlled by the federal government, because I know that some loans that are taken out by banks are still under the federal system in some way, there are payment restructuring systems you can use. And this is actually, it's kind of nefarious and helpful at the same time. So this is really bizarre. Follow me through this.
Okay.
you can sign up for something called an income-driven repayment plan. So it's an IDR. I think that, or IB, it used to be called IBR, but they're constantly, Congress has passed a new law all the time. And so it's called an IDR now. And you can only pay a certain percentage of your income. After a certain period of time, you're supposed to become eligible forgiveness for that. So there's several different aspects to that I haven't touched on yet. It's very complicated. So let me try to surmise this. If it's just for a bachelor's degree, then after 20 years of paying a certain percentage of your loan, so of your income, then you become eligible for forgiveness. At that point, you actually have to pay. So, okay, let's use your friend's example because it's an extreme example. So let's say at the end of this, she still owes $300,000. Okay. Now, so 20 years from now, she owes $300,000 and she's just been paying the interest or something. And then what happens is they send the IRS that you just made $300,000. So the IRS now thinks that fiscal year she made, say you said $2,000 a month. This year she made $324,000 this year. So they send her a tax bill for a different bracket of income for say $60,000 or $70,000. And the IRS now says you have to pay this $60,000 or $70,000 now. Or you can make a payments over a course of a year to pay that off. Given that she only actually makes $24,000, she is basically in a position where she cannot pay the IRS, which is a different kind of debt. If you don't pay your IRS taxes, you can literally go to jail in some cases. So what they're setting people up for in this system is that they become criminals to the Internal Revenue Service after a certain period of time. Now, there's another thing you could do. You could choose not to have your student loans expunged at the end of that period, which seems to be a problem that actually happens automatically, that they just don't actually forgive you in most cases. And what you could do is just pay a certain percentage of your income until you retire. And then you have to pay whatever percentage of your retirement money that you get out of your pension for the rest of your life. And then finally, when you die, your student loans disappear. So the best way, apparently, to get forgiven for your student loans is to die.
Oh, yeah. Just hearing all of this, I was trying to count. I was trying to do calculations and predictions. I was like, oh, what's the possible percentage? Even if it's a small percentage, then I will still be paying for my mortgage, my daily expense, which is not cheap. And then we talked about gas just now and everything being so expensive. I'm just living by myself. That's not me supporting a family. That's not me raising a child. Right, yeah. I just have to let out that really, there's no way that I would still function like I do right now if I graduated undergrad just because I wanted to learn what I'm passionate about and it came out of it with $360,000. Even if it wasn't $360,000, even if you erase a zero at the end, even if it's just $36,000 US, that's still for a graduate student, for a kid that just walked out of college. You're not going to be able to get into society like other kids do.
Well, I mean, I don't want to interrupt you because you're making a lot of amazing points, but actually what I outlined in those 2 or 3 scenarios was the positive case. The truth of it and why it's really so terrible for so many people is, say you graduate with $100,000 or $200,000 in debt, or maybe just not even actually that much. You got a master's degree and you were fiscally conservative with your money, right? And you only borrow $70,000 or $80,000. Okay. Actually, if you're on one of these income-based repayment plans, then your interest rate could be like 5 or 6 or even 7%. And then usually people with that much debt are paying less than the amount of interest that's accumulating. And so the negative amortization you'll end up after 20 or 25 years, this long period of time, owing $1 million because the interest keeps, if it's 6% on 100,000 after 20 or 25 years, it just keeps getting ballooning. Like literally the outside gets bigger and bigger. So these people who are, 50 or 60 or retiring or or whatever, retired, who owe loans, in some cases owe more than $1 million for an education that they got 40 years ago. And, and they've been paying their entire life some amount of money on this. And now they owe such an outlandish figure that the idea of paying it back, it's not possible.
So what you really can't get over isn't high school, it's college, because you have to pay your student loan your entire life.
For anyone who's actually listening who has not yet gone to university, high school, or whatever, don't take out student loans. That is the takeaway. Like, you'll hear a lot of people say, oh, it's good debt. No. That's not true. Don't take out student loans. Whatever you have to do, get a job and go to state university and work. And the dream of coming from the middle class and going to an Ivy school does not exist for you unless you get a scholarship. You should not go into $500,000 of debt, because the reality is you're not going to be able to pay that back.
I will say, regardless of whether Biden actually takes America to an entire relief of this student loan crisis, I don't know if it's going to be just, uprooted entirely anytime soon. Most likely it's not going to. And if that's the reality, I will say that my friend that graduated Berklee College of Music with $360,000, I mean, she did live in a really nice apartment on Newbury Street, which is the street in Boston. And she lived in a nice apartment. And the bank was willing to give her all of that, whoever she borrowed from, they were willing to give her that much. Because when you're, I guess when you're younger, when you're like...
Well, you're a straight A student.
Like when you're 20 or something, but like they're not going to think about the difficulties and the pressure you are going to have when you graduate college. All they want is their money back. The more they give you, the more they get back.
Also, the fact is that the federal government had created a system where the federal government had guaranteed these kinds of loans. And that's why they've increased... There's a chart I've provided, Survey of Consumer Finances. That's the source. And it shows that in 1990, the amount of student loans was roughly equivalent to other loans, but it has increased by 700%. That was from 1990 to 2015. So it's actually worse now than this chart allots for. 700% as many student loans as a form of debt for families under the age of 35. So this is spiraling out of control.
I mean, for our listeners who can't see the visual, like the sample pool are people who are under the age of 35. So people like pretty much our age, like who have entered the workforce for nearly 12, 15 years. And if you look at the charts, there are student debt, home debt, vehicle debt, other debt, and credit card debt. And every other index is kind of just fluctuating within that same range over the course of 25 years. But I wish we could show this like as we're speaking about it, because it just went up so much higher in the past 10 years, 15 years. And I can only imagine that going up even higher during the past 2 years of COVID.
I'm trying not to come down with what I think should happen, because I don't think that's my role here. But if something does not get done about it now, something has to be done eventually. So my thinking is, if Biden doesn't want to fix it entirely, if he just cancels 10,000, well, it won't actually matter. The problem will get so bad eventually that the United States government will be in a position where they are forced to handle it, where they are forced to either like end interest rates on student loans completely, or like lower them to 1 or 2% permanently, or forgive like half or all of it. There's no outcome where in 10 years, when the student debt is like $5 trillion or something, like it won't be handled. It must be handled, because it is such a disproportionate problem financially for so many people in such an aggravating way that the United States fiscal like system will not be able to continue to function without handling it.
Oh yeah.